Maximilian Fischer took a deep breath as he looked out the window. The rain gently tapped against the glass in slow drops, and the town had fallen into silence. He had passed 40, and this autumn felt like one of those years, each year leaving more weight on his shoulders and a deepening loneliness in his eyes. The passing years had taught him not only how to say goodbye, but also how to let go of the memories of everything he had lost. 3 years ago, he had buried his wife Laura, living through one of the most painful days of his life. Since that day, the people who came and went through the town had brought him nothing but loneliness and silence. After that, he had remained just a stranger to the town. Lara's clothes were still hanging in the closet, and on the dusty shelves were all kinds of herbs. Laura used to gather them at the beginning of each spring, dry them, and arrange them neatly in the house. But since that day, those efforts had remained unfinished. Maximilian had been left behind, alone, carrying the pain of the past. One evening, as the wind began to blow, he heard a sound. At first, he thought it was townsfolk talking or a dog barking. But then he realized it was something else. He heard footsteps from a distance, but they weren't just mixed with the wind. Maximilian moved quickly to grab his gun. He rushed outside, trying to see what was going on in the darkness. The cold night air felt like a spark from flint. Then he saw only the silhouette of a woman. In her hands, she held a blood-stained dress, and lying on the ground was a girl, nearly left for dead. Maximilian paused for a moment, looking on with suspicion, but quickly moved closer and picked the woman up in his arms. He gently carried her inside. The burden was light, but the trauma grew heavier with time. The woman looked more like a ghost. He quickly cleaned the wound on her body, but Maximilian could feel how deep each one was. Her eyes were darkened, full of fear. The young woman had found herself in a strange place, in the hands of a man she didn't know. Maximilian looked at her carefully, but asked no questions. He just placed her inside his home. All she needed was peace. In a soft whisper, the woman said, "Don't leave me." But Maximilian didn't say anything. He placed the gun on the ground and gave her food and water. He saw her quickly eat the bread he handed her. Her eyes still full of fear, but like someone who had just escaped death by the river, she accepted it quietly without expecting more. Maximilian accepted her without even knowing who she really was. "Don't leave me," she murmured again, but Maximilian didn't answer, only lowered his head. That night, the snowy winds howled outside. As Maximilian shut the door, it felt like he had rediscovered a bit of that lost peace from long ago. The woman was healing, slowly drifting into the deep sleep. Maximilian had been alone for so long and had grown used to the silence, but tonight, something was different. Just like the storm outside, the silence inside him had started to shift. The next morning, as the woman began to wake up, her eyes were still wary, but there was a sense of trust in her. When she turned to Maximilian, she asked, "What's your name?" But there was more than just fear in her voice. It was a question. Maximilian slowly replied, "My name is Maximilian, and you're safe here." The woman looked at him carefully at first, then glanced down at her torn clothes. Maximilian gave her the basic things she needed and started helping her over time. Each day, as the woman healed more and more, she started to feel human again, but Maximilian could sense how far her past truly was. He realized she wasn't just running from a town, but from a much wider world. But the next morning, Maximilian woke to the sound of a rooster outside. That's when he realized that with the arrival of spring, something had started to change in and around the town. But he felt something bad was coming. He slowly went to the window and looked out. That's when he heard the sound of a horse, and his eyes focused on a figure approaching from far away. His eyes widened. More than 60 riders were coming toward him. Maximilian's heart began to race. At the front was a leader, drawing closer with every step, a proud and powerful man. The woman's father. It had taken time for her father to find her, but now the entire Comanche tribe had surrounded him and his home. There was a coldness and clarity in Maximilian's eyes. This wasn't a battle, it was an explanation, a moment of decision. The woman stepped forward, placing herself in front of Maximilian. "They've come to take me," she said, her eyes showing neither fear nor comfort, just a sense of responsibility. "But I have to stay here." Seeing her father had brought a change to the young woman's eyes, but there was also fear. Maximilian, looking at her, realized she had entrusted herself to a stranger, to the cold hands of a man she barely knew. Her eyes were buried in the wounds of a distant past. She didn't want to return to the world she had lost every part of, but now, caught between her father's threat and the man she had come to trust, there was no easy way forward. As Maximilian watched the horsemen outside approach, his heartbeat slowly picked up. 70 Comanche warriors, led by the man at their front, had gathered just a few hundred meters away. In the heart of a hard-working man, a spark of tension was forming. An unknown man's arrival was beginning to feel like a serious threat. The woman's father had always been a hunter, but this time, the prey would be someone else. Maximilian quietly grabbed the rifle he had set aside and carefully moved toward the door. The woman turned toward him calmly, her eyes landing on the gun in his hands. "You don't have to do this," she said. Her voice didn't tremble, but watching the fear in her heart weighed heavily on Maximilian. "These are my people. No one can stand against them," she said. "They've decided to take me back. Maybe you can't send them away, but you can still fight." Maximilian paused. There was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. It was a kind of quiet determination, lost in the past, but free of anger. Once a proud man, Maximilian pressed down on his own chest, then turned back without saying a word. The woman was right. Yes, there was another way, one without violence. He slowly closed the door, set down the rifle, and pulled out an old magazine and map from his pocket. He began reading the letters one by one, deciding to move forward to face his enemy. The girl would have to fight to live along the river without fire, and Maximilian, he would have to face the mistakes of a past life. As his eyes turned to the town, the woman had already opened the door and started gathering her belongings. Something had changed. What she was doing meant she wasn't waiting for someone else to act. They set out on a path without a word. Yes, with just a single step, a new path could begin. Finally, the woman looked ahead and pointed to a hill in the distance. "Father," she said. Maximilian thought for a moment and decided to look outside. The rain and wind were pounding hard, and the horses that had vanished for a moment were now drawing closer. The girl could clearly see the silhouette ahead of her. The shimmer in her eyes tightened in her stomach, and Maximilian made an internal decision. The woman and he were on a path now, but which step would be taken next would make all the difference. They had now reached a turning point, one where there was no easy way back. When Maximilian stepped outside the door, he felt the dust being swept by the wind under the darkening sky. His eyes were fixed on the land surrounded by the Comanche warriors. There was weariness in his gaze, but also determination. This was a man who had faced loss for years, made peace with loneliness, buried his pain deep inside. But now, in front of his own heart, he stood at the point where past, future, death, and salvation met. The woman stood behind Maximilian before going back inside. There was no fear in her eyes, but there was unease. With each step, the threat of her father's approaching army grew stronger. Maximilian struggled to understand how she could be so brave. He was a man who never thought of taking a single step from his place, only trying to come to terms with the pain of his past while she had accepted to carry and embrace hers. Her resolve stirred something inside Maximilian, triggering an inner battle. The town was wrapped in a heavy silence. Everyone was inside, every door closed, every window tightly shut. As Maximilian watched the shadows disappear into the darkness, he realized the Comanche warriors had begun to surround his home. In that moment, the burdens on the town's back felt heavier. He too had a responsibility tied to this place. Should he really stand against them? Or was there another path to choose? The woman touched Maximilian's shoulder and said, "You don't have to protect me." There was trust in her eyes, but also awareness. "This is not your fight. I just want to stay. I just want to live." Maximilian turned to her and said, "Don't let me be the reason your life changes." He took a deep breath. "All I can give you is what you deserve. But fighting your battle, that's something entirely different." Just then, the sharp cry of a horse echoed through the town. As Maximilian took a step forward, he felt the silence inside him. He thought maybe this woman would settle in this town and spend her life here. He thought about how dangerous it would be to start a journey with her, but there was another side to it, too. If this town could offer them hope, then maybe something could change. Maybe this dangerous journey could become their salvation. The riders that had come into the town began to gather around Maximilian. One of them stepped forward, pulled off the blue band from his head, and shouted, "Who is the man here?" Maximilian hesitated, unsure what to say. He was just a man, just a stranger. But against the feeling that hollowed out his chest, he began to peel back the layers of his past. The woman stepped back. As her eyes searched for anger in the warriors' faces, she leaned against Maximilian's back. "They want to take me," she whispered. "But this fight will only bring harm to them." Maximilian stood silently for a moment and, in that moment, realized something had to end no matter what. The woman looked at him and said, "Don't leave me." It was so soft, so deep, that Maximilian looked at her again and smiled. Just then, the Comanche warriors stood right before him. They took another step forward. Maximilian, for a moment, grabbed his weapon but then set it on the ground. In the eyes of each warrior, there was a sincere threat and a deep emotional burden. Maximilian stepped forward toward the Comanche leader. The woman looked at him and stepped back again. Then she said, "Don't leave me." And those words left a sharp ache in Maximilian's heart. At that moment, he made a quiet decision. He wouldn't draw his weapon. This was a fight that came from the deepest part of his heart. With an inner courage, Maximilian looked into the leader's eyes and said, "You're going to leave me here." The Comanche leader saw cold determination and pain in Maximilian's eyes. He paused for a moment. At that moment, he felt as if he had already lost the fight. But still, he turned to Maximilian and said, "You won't have the strength to end this war." As Maximilian stood up to the Comanche leader's harsh stare, he didn't flinch for even a second. The leader's words echoed in his ears like the whistling of the wind, but the determination inside him was stronger than any sound. The woman had stepped back, but her eyes were still fixed on Maximilian. The warriors took another step forward, but no weapon, no threat, would change this man's decision. The Comanche leader studied the calmness on Maximilian's face. Sometimes, seeing the deep courage in a man only made a warrior stronger. In a brief moment of silence, Maximilian searched the leader's eyes for some kind of acknowledgement. No matter what happened, he was ready to do whatever it took for the woman's life. But the leader, unexpectedly, slowly bowed his head and stepped back. The woman stepped forward, and among those cold stares, she could feel an old echo waking up in the leader's heart. She said, "This fight is mine and mine alone." Her voice was firmer this time, but there was also something in it, a sense of belief. "They can take me the way they want, but I'll fight for myself." As the Comanche leader looked at her, he felt something shift in his eyes. Approaching Maximilian, he said, "I'm not thinking of taking the girl." His voice was steady, but one thing's clear. Everything in this house has changed. You don't have to walk this road together. When Maximilian met the woman's gaze, he saw her trust in him. And now, something had changed for him too. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. They had to choose to fight, to do what was right, together. Maximilian looked into the leader's eyes once more and said, "If you want to go back, that's your choice. But we're staying here. This is our home." The leader saw the certainty in Maximilian's eyes. He paused for a moment, and then silence fell among the Comanche warriors. In this moment where the woman stepped forward and Maximilian stepped back, a turning point had begun. The warriors were waiting for their leader's decision, but something had shifted. This wasn't a war, it was an agreement. The leader lowered his head and said, "It's enough for us," then slowly backed away. There's no need to fight. All that remained was a cold wind, like a slowly rising storm. Maximilian and the woman began to walk toward the river. Behind them, the Comanche warriors were heading back, but ahead of them lay an unknown, dark path. The woman gently touched Maximilian's shoulder and, without raising her voice, asked, "What happens now?" As Maximilian walked forward with heavy steps, he felt every moment carefully. "Now, everything has its path," he said. "But here, in our home, we decide. And we're here. This is the path we've chosen." The woman lagged slightly behind, but Maximilian's words gave her hope. They carried a belief that those who survive can still choose for themselves. Everything had a beginning, a purpose, and on this difficult journey, they would ultimately hold their fate in their own hands. In her eyes, there was no longer fear from the past, only a slowly forming hope. Then, with a new determination in her eyes, the woman said, "We'll do this together. Here, we need to find ourselves." Inside the town, the cold wind outside made everything tremble. The echoes of Maximilian and the woman's footsteps rang through the narrow streets. Their eyes were lost among the glances of the townspeople, but the trust and determination they had in each other grew stronger with every step. On one side were the pains of the past, on the other, the fear of an unknown future. But one thing was certain: they were going to carve out their own path. Maximilian walked closer to the woman and said, "We don't have to stay here. Let's not let this place become a repeat of the past. We just have to look ahead. If we came here searching for safety, then maybe we need to leave to truly find it." The woman looked at Maximilian. "But the town accepted us," she said. There was peace in her eyes, but also uncertainty. "And here, maybe we can find ourselves. Whatever happens, something is here, like the lost hopes by the riverbank." Maximilian listened carefully to her words, turning his ears toward the deep silence of the town. The woman wanted to leave behind the cold outside and the times she felt lost in the streets, but the town still carried a threat. They had managed to stand by each other, but the townspeople were still watching their presence. The woman took a step toward Maximilian and said, "The townspeople want to see us here. But is anyone really ready to accept a world lost like the shadows by the riverbank? How much courage do we really have to leave behind an old life?" Maximilian looked into her eyes and said, "Courage is hidden in every step we take together, and we'll take each one together. Everything is starting to change here. The hopes lost by the river, we can bring them here, to this town." In the town square, a few men were watching them, observing their every move. The woman paused for a moment, then quickened her pace and continued walking beside Maximilian. Every word they exchanged was stronger than the stares of the townspeople. One man stepped in front of Maximilian and said, "Newcomers," with meaning in his voice. "This is our town. If you're going to stay here, you'll have to face your past." Maximilian paused for a moment, then turned to the woman and said, "The past isn't just a burden, it's something we move through. If we really want to stay here, we have to let go of the past. And if the town accepts that, then this becomes our home." The woman stepped closer to Maximilian and said, "Our home. This shouldn't be a place just for prisoners of the past. It should be for those who chase freedom." For a moment, the townspeople were silent, but the tension between them began to ease. Maximilian and the woman had decided to leave behind the threats within the town and the darkness of the past. The trust they had in each other would last not just for this moment, but for a lifetime. Maximilian and the woman turned to Maximilian and said, "This is our place." There was trust in her eyes. "A new journey begins." Maximilian looked into her eyes and said, "And with you, I'll walk every road. Because here, we're together, and nothing matters more than that." The town watched them with every step. The pain of the past faded like a memory lost within the streets. Now, the townspeople were witnessing their future. Maximilian and the woman, together with courage and trust, were starting a new life. The past had finally left them behind, and the town had become the place where they would take the first step into their new life.